But we're going to go ahead and get started on today's topic, which I'm happy to talk about. I've been kind of going around this topic, and I actually created a product out there, or a workbook that you can use to actually do the first three phases of this, of what I call the 7 phases. And the 7 phases are the different sections that we go through, or that I go through personally, and I have athletes go through that I coach in order to take them to that next level, or to even just get them through their season. But the first 3 phases actually can do a lot of things. But before I get into that, I did want to um, talk about what I'm looking to do here, which is one, to do the normal topic, which today is the 7 phases, and then at the same time to go over any questions you may have in regards to running, or walking for that matter. So while I'm going through this, if you have any question, and as people pop on, I'll interrupt my spiel of the 7 phases to encourage questions that you may have as people come on. So hopefully the camera, lighting, and everything's okay, and the mic is okay. So first things first, the first thing I would like to ask is a question of the day. Question of the day. First question I have is what, and I asked this earlier in a post, is what's your favorite race? What is your favorite race? For me, my favorite race is this one called Reach the Beach. Is absolutely my favorite here in New England, in my state, New Hampshire. And what this race is a relay race, and there's 2 vans of 6 people in each van. You can have more or less, but typically it's 12 people total in 2 vans, and you are going to run 200-ish miles from the mountains down to the ocean of the state of New Hampshire. And it is very hilly, but it is super fun, super fun. And one of the things I love about it is that it usually takes about 24 hours, so it's grueling. If you are in the second team, you are running at midnight and or 2 o'clock in the morning. And usually I get stuck in van 2. I haven't been in the first 6 legs, which is more of a normal running time, I guess you could call it. But anyways, it's a awesome race. It's part of the Ragnar series. I think Reach the Beach and Ragnar kind of got together and are working together to create this race. But I highly recommend it if you are in New Hampshire. Or 2 years ago, I joined a random team, and we had people from Chicago come over, and I was part of that team. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's typically what I do, is join random teams and just meet new people and just have a lot of fun running and doing crazy things. So I'm interested in what your race is, what your favorite race is. If you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and just leave your favorite race there in the comments. So let's talk about the 7 phases. So there are 7 phases in the next level running process, and each one, let me say it this way. For every season, there are 7 phases, and the season usually takes about a whole year to go through, especially when you're beginning. As you get advanced, and depending on the race that you're doing, we try to cycle through each season multiple times throughout a year. So it's almost like how in high school and college, if you ever ran, you have track, cross country, you have indoor, outdoor track, and cross country. So sort of something like that, where we try to rotate through as quickly as we possibly can to get the person moving through different levels of performance. So if we can get 4 peaks throughout the year, then that's what we'll try to do, and try to hit 4 PRs throughout the year. So, but within each season, there are 7 phases. And the 7 phases are recovery, rest, base, build, base, cycle, and then you have the time, taper period, as well as the race period. So that's the 7. And I'm going to go through them briefly. I'm not going to go into too much detail unless you have questions about them. But the recovery phase is a transition from your race phase. And that's the other thing about the season, is that they are on top of each other, meaning that it's just one gradual move from one season to the next. And so after your race week is done, you end up going into your recovery phase. And what the recovery phase is meant to do is to transition into the new season. And what we typically have our athletes do is run the same workouts of your race week. So let's say your race week was 4 or 5 days of running. Whatever you did that week, for your recovery week, we're going to ask you to do that same workouts, only at an easy pace. Meaning that if you did a track workout and you did 5 400s, let's say, then for your recovery week, we're going to ask you to do that same workout, only easy. Meaning go out to the track, go and run it nice and easy. And what's the point of the recovery phase? The point of the recovery phase is to actually just reflect on your prior year and get ready for your new season, or your prior season and reflect for your new season. What were your highs? What were your lows? And what we find is that if you go back to that last week, because let's face it, race week is pretty intense. Your emotions are ready to go. And race week, I'll just mention it quickly here, is like the peak, the last race. This is it, all out, holding nothing back. So you're coming off that peak. And so now what we want to do is reflect. And what we find is in the recovery phase, if you reflect and go back to your track workout, you will find that you'll start remembering things. You'll start going over the things that you did. And it's actually, in our opinion, kind of cool, because you kind of go back and say, oh yeah, I remember that workout, and this is what I did here. And at the end, and the recovery week can be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to 3 weeks. It depends on you as an individual. It depends on the race that you ran, meaning that if you did a 5K versus a marathon, your recovery week is going to be a lot longer, or it's going to take you longer to go through it. And the whole point of the recovery week is to actually be completely, hello. The whole point of the recovery phase is to recover from your race. So if you ran a marathon, you're going to be sore after. And it may take you a week or two to get over that lactic acid and the damage that you did to your body. And I say damage. It's pretty painful sometimes to run that last race, because you're giving it your all. And at the end of your race, you probably don't feel like you can run another step. So, so the recovery phase is just to get you to that point where you feel that you are ready to go for your next season. You're recovered, your muscles can take it, you're mentally ready, and you're recovered. Then you transition to the rest phase. if you have any questions, go ahead and ask any questions that might be related to running or walking. I'm just going through the 7 phases right now. So if you have any questions, I'll either answer them now or maybe at the end of the 7 phases. I spent some time on the recovery, so now I'm going into the second part of the 7 phases, which is the rest. And in the rest phase is cross training. We suggest walking, and that can last from anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks as well. It depends on how quickly you want to get back into running. So right after your recovery, you go into rest. Yeah, I think I may need more than 1 week to recover. So the recovery phase, for me, typically, especially if I'm training for a half marathon, can take up to 2 to 3 weeks because I'm just totally burnt out by the time I get to the end of that. So typically I try to do it in 2 because I'm really anxious to get back into my season. But yeah, I haven't done maybe a 5K. I could probably get back to it in a week or so. But then I try to get, oh, you're welcome. As soon as that is done, though, I try to get right into the rest period, which is walking. And to jump forward a couple of phases, the cycle phase, which is your normal training. So when you go out there and you get a schedule online, or you ask people for training schedules, usually they give you what your cycle week is going to be, what we consider the cycle phase. And actually they do a whole bunch of stuff in that one schedule. But your typical running, we like to convert that into minutes. So let's say on Tuesdays, your typical run's going to be 5 miles, and you are going to run it at, let's say, 10-minute pace. Then technically speaking, you're going to be working out for 50 minutes on that day, which means that when you are in your rest phase, we ask that you walk or cross train for 50 minutes. That way your body is getting used to the time that you need in order to go into your season, into the other phases. Now, we also suggest in the rest period not to go very hard at all. And if you're walking, for me, if I'm walking, I'm taking my camera. I always have my phone on me anyways, but I'm taking pictures. I'm enjoying myself. And this phase can last anywhere from, again, 1 to 3 weeks, depending on how long it will take you to get to that next phase, which is the build phase. Now, a lot of the schedules that you get out there kind of build or put together a build and sprint training or intense training. For me, I like to separate them and prepare for it. So for the next whatever time it takes for a runner, depending on how far they want to run, in the build phase, we're trying to get you to the distance of running. So you've just come off recovery. You've now rested, which could be anywhere from 2 weeks to even 6 weeks, which means that your body probably needs a time to build up, and that's why we call it the build phase, to build up to the distance that you want to be running. And in order to do that, we have a philosophy called walk, run, run. It's not really my philosophy, it's just the process that we go. Since in the rest phase you're already walking, and this is the beauty of it, since you're already walking the 50 minutes, it's an easier transition through the build. And what we'll do is we try to get you from the 50 minutes walking to 50 minutes running. And for some of you that might be distance. So going back to our original example, we said, let's say our runner wanted to run 5 miles and that their pace was 10 minutes. That would be 50 minutes of running. So by the time you get there, theoretically, you should be able to run your 5 miles. And that's what the build phase is going from walking 50 minutes in our example, going to running 50 minutes. Which then, once we get there, we go into the base phase. And the base phase is just the period before we really get into training. And so now we built up our mileage, our distance. Now we want to build on our speed, but our easy speed. So here we actually pick out the exact pace that we want you to run in order to hit your goal. So when you say that you want to run your 10K at, let's say, going back to our example, our person's running 10-minute miles. Let's say that they want to run a 9-minute 10K for their race. Well, we know how to translate that into, and it's different for everybody. And once you're new, we have to kind of figure out what that level is. But we know exactly what your easy pace should be. So right now, I want to train for a 5K, and I want to run it at a little bit below 6-minute miles. My easy pace has to be 7 minutes and 30 seconds per mile. So that's what the base period is for, is to get you to that speed. So let's say at the end of the build phase, I apologize if you can hear my cat. It wants to get out so bad. Let's say at the end of the base phase, I'm averaging, in my case, or we'll go back to our fictitious runner here, is running 10-minute miles, and we want to get them down to, say, 9:30 pace, and I'm just making this up. So each week of the base phase, we are inching that down. So we start you at 10, and then we see how you do for that week, and then we try to get you down to 9:50. Then we have you run that week, and then we see how you do, and then we try to get you down to 9:40. And we're slowly applying the pressure, but we're looking at certain heart rates too, because we want to see that you're adapting to that pace. So this base period could take up to who knows how long. Depends on your race and your physical wellness at that time, and you as an individual. But eventually you get to the pace that you want. And from there, we now have set you up to do really good things, because now we're ready to kick butt. We're going into the cycle section, or the cycle phase. And this is the bread and butter, because now we're injecting real workouts. I should say, in the base period and the build period, we are including hill workouts and power workouts for that purpose. And I'm not going to get too much into details into power versus speed, but during that time period, we are doing hill workouts, but we're working on our power. But they're not fast by any means. We're just running the paces that we're wanting to in each of those phases. Then in the cycle phase, we start injecting track workouts. We start injecting tempo workouts, and we're adjusting you and getting you to the paces that we need you to run at. So, and we're trying to simulate races, and we're also doing time trials. And so usually the cycles, there's 2 parts, A and B, to a cycle. Cycle A is your like running your distances, you're doing your track workouts, you're doing your tempo runs. Then cycle B is the week of your time trial. And what we're doing is we're beating you up. I mean, and I say beating you up. You feel it. We're getting you right at that edge. Like we're dancing on that fine line of too much but not too much. And your body is like, oh man. And when you get to that time trial week, we kind of like let off the gas a little bit, and your body kind of adjusts and rests and recuperates. But at the same time, we're doing a time trial, which is to test how you react, and we want to see how you do. Because the idea is that week, that time trial week, that entire week is a mock of what you're going to be doing in your race period, in your race phase. because we want to, I mean, that's what this is all about, especially if you're competing. If you're not competing, then you could probably just get away with base all the way up to the base phase, to the build phase. If you are competing or you're looking for a new personal best, then what you want to be doing is trying to mimic your race. And we're talking about your paces, we're talking about the terrain, we're talking about your let's say for a half marathon. I'm out there, I'm simulating when I'm going to drink my water, what type of things I'm going to be using. Because when we get to our race phase, which is the last week, we should have it memorized, we should have it rehearsed, we should have it like it's just second nature to us. It's just going to happen. Only, of course, our adrenaline's up and running. So that's what the cycles are. Then we go into the taper. And the taper is about it could be 1 week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. I experimented last year with 3 weeks, and it actually worked out pretty well. I was scared because I thought, oh man, that's a lot of time to like let off the gas pedal. But it actually ended up working. So I don't know, I'm going to experiment with, this year I'm going to focus on 5Ks. And I'm going to experiment with a 1 week taper and go the other extreme and see what happens. And that's one of the philosophies that we hear that we have, is that we want to experiment. Yeah, there's the general things and we talk about generalities, but when I'm practicing myself or I'm coaching other athletes, one of the things we want to do is experiment and have fun with running and take us to that next level and play with things a little bit. Not too much, right? Because that could lead to injuries, but we want to see where your true potential lies. So we want to play with certain aspects of your training. So when we get to the taper phase, what that week is about is running your cycle phases. And I should say, throughout the year, we're running as if. And what do I mean by that? When we run as if, let's say your goal for our fictitious runner is to run a 9-minute mile for their race. And those 9 minutes is their target. By the time we get to the taper phase, they may be faster, they may be slower. And what we're going to adjust in the taper phase is how fast you're actually running. So let's say that our runner is at not 9-minute miles, but they're at 8:50 pace, or maybe they're at 9:10 pace. We're now going to adjust the entire schedule and adjust everything so that you are running how you are performing. And when we do that, what we find is that your body transitions. And it's funny because in a taper period, you think you'd want to reduce your intensity. In most cases, because we are pushing the limits, we do not end up going beyond what we're experimenting with. So last year when I did the training for the half marathon, my goal was to run a 6:30 pace for a half marathon. At that time, I was training, all my measurements came up at 7 minutes per mile. So I was training throughout the year as if I was running a 6:30, but in the taper I ended up having to transition to a 7-minute pace. And that's what the taper is. And then we just go through the cycles, only we do an adjustment. And what you end up finding is you are refining our form, we're refining, we're really rehearsing, we're really getting in tune with our body, with how is our body reacting when we go up a hill? How is our body reacting when we're going down a hill? How much does our pace change when we do different things? Because we want to start locking in. If you're going to experiment with different things, like say different equipment, different shoes, different, let's say different fuel, this is the time to do it, especially early on in the taper, is not to go beyond the taper to do that. And what we end up seeing is that by the time we get to race period with that adjustment, and to be honest, I don't know why it happens, what the scientific thing is about it, but what we end up seeing is a transition of awesomeness is all I can say. Is So just to relate to mine, since it's the most recent and I can speak of it personally, is I was training at 7-minute miles now, and by the time I got to my race pace or race phase, I was able to transition to 650. So I didn't get my target of 630, but I did go from a 720 or 715 pace down to a 650 pace in one season, and that was even after an injury. So once you get through the taper phase, then we go into the race phase. And the race phase is actually we chop out a whole bunch of stuff. We actually just focus on speed. We don't do really much distance running, and we're working on refining our form still, and we're focused more on form at that point. And what we end up doing is rehearsing, and we go through the race and we map out the race. So by the time on race week we are getting to the race, we know what we're going to do almost every mile of the race. So we look at the elevations, we kind of say, okay, in the first mile there's a hill, and since we know how we're going to run, we know that our pace is going to drop down to here. So we make out a plan of the entire race, and you're mentally rehearsing every step of the way. So last year when I did the half marathon, I had a plan for every water station plus certain miles within that race, so that I knew, okay, when the gun goes off, based on my time trials, my adrenaline's up, and I usually end up running 10 to 20 seconds faster for the first half mile. And now I need to compensate for that, right? Because now I don't want to keep that pace up, because I could burn out by the time I get to the end, before I even get to the end of the race. So knowing that up front, we can make adjustments. Okay, there's a hill here, so now we're going to expect our body to reduce by 20 seconds. If it's within the first half mile, and we know that we're already going to be 20 seconds faster, we know that we can actually lay off on that uphill and not expend so much energy, because we're already ahead of the pace that we want. And so we're coming up with a game plan in the race phase, and we're just mentally rehearsing it, so that by the time we actually get to our race, I mean, it's done. I mean, we physically have gotten there. You know what you're going to do, and you know how your body's going to react. We have the plan out there. We've mentally rehearsed it. And I have to say, it's actually kind of, I'll just speak again to my last race, my last half marathon. When I was driving to the race, I was mentally rehearsing one more time, and I got to the end and I said, that's it. I mean, now I just have to execute the plan. I'm physically prepared. I know what I'm going to run. I know how I'm going to run it. I just have the nerves, the what if, that mental what if, that negative person that comes in there in your head starts trying to edge its way in. And at that point, you just have to say, look, I'm prepared. I know what I'm going to do. I just need to just show up. And things that you cannot control are the only things that that you really have to worry about, or actually not even worry about. I mean, let's say that you are planning this, but it's, you've been training in 70-degree weather, but today on race day, it's 120. I'm just being exaggerative here. I wouldn't expect to run the same times, and that's sort of out of your control. And unfortunately, those things do happen. I've had courses change on me. I thought I was going to run this course, and I show up to race day, and they show you the map, and they say, oh, we're going to go this way. oops, yeah, how I mentally prepared for that. I kind of just have to wing it at that point. And those things you cannot prepare for, predict, but you just kind of go with it, and it's part of the journey. So all in all, that's the 7 phases. So again, they're the recovery, rest, build, base, cycles, and then you have the taper, and then the race phase. So at this point, I'm open for any questions about any of the 7 phases, or if you have any questions about running at all. Now would be the time to ask. While you're getting ready for your questions to ask them, I'll just say that I'm planning to stay on Instagram now for go lives at this time, 12:15 New York time, 12:15 p.m. New York time, and I'll have a different subject. Feel free to shoot me a direct message of any topics that you want me to go over, especially about our philosophy here at Next Level Running, or even just your race. If you even want to go over maybe a schedule that you have and you want me to take a look at it and bring it up during a live session. Yeah, I just want to have fun with this. I want to be able to help give you as much advice and tips. Hopefully doing this outside, now that the weather's nice, is better than me doing it inside. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to helping you out wherever you are in your running journey. And yeah, ask your questions. I'll keep it open for another minute because we are now a little bit past 30 minutes. Thank you. You have a great day too. Thank you for showing up. Really, really grateful and sticking with me and listening. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. But until next time, happy running.